My name is Brianna Hayes. I am 32 years old. I live alone in a narrow rented apartment on the edge of Chicago, and I work the night shift at a distribution warehouse where the lights never fully turn off and time feels like it stretches until it breaks. I move boxes for a living. I scan barcodes. I drink burnt coffee at 3 in the morning while my body argues with sleep. This is the life my family likes to pretend does not exist. 2 weeks ago, a doctor sat across from me in a room that smelled like disinfectant and said a word that did not echo the way I expected it to. Cancer. He explained stages and options, numbers and probabilities, but all I could think about was how quiet my phone stayed afterward. I did not call my mother. I did not call my brother or my sister. I went to work that night and lifted boxes like nothing had changed, because that is what I have always done. I absorb impact. I keep moving. Mark, my older brother, is a celebrated surgeon. Lauren, my older sister, is a corporate attorney with framed awards and a downtown office. When my mother, Evelyn Hayes, talks about her children, she talks about them. She talks about success, sacrifice, legacy. When she talks about me, she lowers her voice. She calls me sensitive. She says I took a different path. It sounds polite until you hear it enough times. Last Sunday, my mother hosted a dinner to celebrate Mark's promotion. White tablecloths, expensive wine, extended family. I found out about it through a group photo Lauren posted online. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was dressed like they belonged. I was not invited. Later, my mother texted me and said it was not personal. She said the night was about appearances and she did not want me to feel uncomfortable after working all night. I stared at that message during my break, my hands still smelling like cardboard and dust, and I almost laughed. What none of them know is that I have spent the last 7 years paying for the foundation beneath their lives. They do not know why the house was never foreclosed. They do not know why certain calls stopped coming. They do not know whose name was signed when things were falling apart. They never asked. I never told them. Silence was easier. Silence kept things stable. There is a moment when you are told your body is quietly turning against you, when you start asking different questions, not about survival, about worth, about choice, about whether love that only exists when you are useful was ever real to begin with. I am running out of time, and for the first time, I am wondering what happens if I stop holding everything together. I grew up believing that responsibility had a sound. For me, it was the low hum of a refrigerator running in a dark kitchen long after everyone else had gone to bed, the click of a calculator at the dining table, the slow exhale my mother made when she thought no one was listening. Responsibility never announced itself. It settled quietly on my shoulders and stayed there. My father died when I was 25. To the outside world, it was a heart attack. Sudden. Tragic. People brought casseroles and flowers and said how strong my mother was, how lucky she was to have such successful children to lean on. What no one saw was what followed after the funeral, when the cards stopped coming and the phone calls changed tone. I saw envelopes before anyone else did. I opened them because someone had to. Final notices, legal language, numbers that did not belong to any version of the life my family pretended we were living. My father had been drowning quietly for years. Bad investments, loans taken to cover other loans, promises made to the wrong people. By the time he died, the debt had teeth. It was not the kind you could negotiate away with a payment plan and a sincere apology. It was the kind that waited patiently and then destroyed everything in its path. Mark was in his surgical residency then. Lauren had just started law school. My mother was barely functioning, moving through the house like a ghost, repeating that everything would be fine if we stayed calm. She needed someone to believe her. So I did. I remember sitting across from a man in a small office with no windows, signing my name at the bottom of documents I did not fully understand yet. I remember thinking that it was temporary, that I would step in, stabilize things, and then step back out once the storm passed. That was the story I told myself. It made the weight easier to carry. I took on extra shifts, then another job, then another. I stopped going out with friends. I let my phone battery die because it was easier than explaining why I was always tired. When Mark sent photos from the hospital with captions about saving lives, I liked them. When Lauren posted about moot court wins and internships, I commented with pride. I meant it. I loved them. I just did not mention that I was sleeping 4 hours a night and waking up with my jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. The house never went into foreclosure. The calls stopped. The threats dissolved into silence. To my family, it looked like luck, like resilience, like proof that everything worked out the way it was supposed to. My mother told people that my father had been more prepared than anyone realized. She said he had taken care of us. I did not correct her. Over time, the narrative settled. Mark became the hero. Lauren became the example. I became the footnote, the one who never quite found her direction, the one who worked too much and still did not have anything impressive to show for it. At family gatherings, people asked me if I was still at the warehouse. They said it gently, the way you ask about a lingering injury. I learned how to disappear without leaving. I sat at the end of tables. I washed dishes before anyone could tell me to relax. I listened more than I spoke. Silence became my currency. It bought stability. It bought peace. It bought my family the illusion that their lives were clean and self-made. My body started sending signals years before I paid attention. Headaches that lingered too long. Nosebleeds that came out of nowhere. A fatigue that sleep never touched. I told myself it was normal. Night shift did that to people. Stress did that to people. Responsibility did that to people. I swallowed painkillers and kept going. There were moments, rare but sharp, when I almost said something. When I stood in the bathroom at work, staring at my reflection, my eyes dull under fluorescent lights, and wondered what would happen if I stopped, if I let the truth spill out and watched what it broke. But then my phone would buzz with a message from my mother asking if I was coming for Sunday dinner, and I would type yes and delete the rest. I told myself that love did not need recognition to be real, that sacrifice did not require witnesses, that as long as my family was safe, my role did not matter. It was a clean, comforting lie. I held on to it because letting go meant asking questions I was not ready to answer. By the time my body finally forced me to listen, the pattern was too ingrained to undo easily. I had spent years teaching everyone, including myself, that I could absorb whatever was handed to me, that I would always be there in the background, holding things together quietly. And for a long time, that belief was the only thing that kept everything from collapsing. The diagnosis stopped being theoretical the moment my body refused to cooperate. It was not dramatic. There was no collapse or ambulance ride. It was quieter than that, more humiliating. I started dropping things at work. My hands would open without permission. A box would hit the concrete, split open, spill its contents, and I would stand there blinking while my supervisor asked if I was okay in a voice that already knew the answer. I told him I was fine. I said it too quickly. The headache stopped responding to painkillers. The fatigue grew teeth. Sleep stopped being rest and turned into a brief pause between waves of exhaustion. I began to feel like my body was no longer mine, like it had made a decision and forgotten to include me in the conversation. When the doctor confirmed the stage and spoke carefully, choosing his words like they might break, I nodded and took notes. I thanked him for his time. I asked how long I could keep working. That was the question that mattered most to me. I did not tell my family right away. Not because I was afraid of their reaction, but because I already knew it. Concern would arrive late and leave early. Sympathy would be filtered through inconvenience. My illness would become another awkward topic to manage, another thing to lower voices about in public. I was not ready to carry that on top of everything else. It became harder to hide when I started missing calls, when I slept through alarms, when my mother left voicemails asking if I was avoiding her again. One evening, after I missed another family dinner I had never been invited to in the first place, she called and said I was being distant. She said it hurt her feelings. I stared at the peeling paint on my kitchen wall and apologized. The night everything cracked open happened at a restaurant I could not afford. My mother had organized a celebration for Lauren, who had just closed a major corporate deal. She texted me that I should come this time. She said it would look strange if I was absent again. I showered after my shift, scrubbed the smell of cardboard from my skin, and put on the only clean dress I owned that did not look like it belonged to another decade. I arrived late. They were already seated. Mark barely looked up from his drink. Lauren smiled the way people do when they are performing politeness. My mother kissed my cheek and whispered that I looked tired. She asked if I was still working nights, and before I could answer, she turned back to her friends and said that I had always been stubborn about practical jobs. The conversation flowed around me. Promotion, investments, vacations planned months in advance. When someone asked what I did, my mother answered for me. She said I was still figuring things out. She laughed lightly, as if it were charming. I felt something inside me tilt. Halfway through the meal, Mark mentioned stress. He said he had been exhausted lately and joked that he did not know how people with real jobs managed it. He said it without malice. That almost made it worse. Everyone laughed. I felt heat climb my neck and settle behind my eyes. I told them then, not dramatically, just enough. I said I had been seeing a doctor. I said I was sick. The table went quiet for exactly the amount of time it took for discomfort to register. My mother reached for my hand and asked if it was serious. When I said yes, she frowned and asked if it was work-related. Lauren asked if I had insurance. Mark said nothing at all. The conversation shifted. Slowly, deliberately, they talked about logistics, about appointments, about how stressful this must be for everyone. No one asked how I felt. No one asked what I needed. When the check came, my mother glanced at me and hesitated, then paid without comment. I thanked her and hated myself for it. After that night, something in me went quiet. Not the resigned silence I had practiced for years, but a sharper one. I stopped covering. I stopped smoothing over. When the bank called to confirm details I had always handled without question, I let the phone ring. When an email came addressed to me about obligations that were not mine to carry anymore, I closed it without replying. Daniel noticed before anyone else did. He had been a co-worker years ago, back when I still believed effort would eventually be seen. We had kept in touch loosely, trading messages on birthdays, checking in during holidays. When I did not respond for weeks, he showed up at my apartment with takeout and a look that told me he was not leaving. I told him everything. The debt, the silence, the diagnosis. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tight, his hands folded like he was holding himself still. When I finished, he did not offer solutions. He did not tell me to be strong. He just said that none of it had been fair. That night, lying in bed after he left, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how tired I was. Not just physically, tired of holding things together. Tired of being the invisible support beam everyone leaned on without noticing. My body was already letting go. For the first time, I wondered what would happen if I did too. Brianna had always believed that pain came in waves. You survived one, then waited for the next. But she was wrong. Real pain didn't arrive like waves. It arrived like gravity, quiet, constant, inescapable. It began the day she collapsed in the courthouse bathroom. She had just finished cross-examining a witness, her voice steady, her posture impeccable, the way she had trained herself to be. The verdict was still hours away. The case was still alive. She barely made it to the sink before the dizziness hit. Her vision blurred, her knees buckled. Warm liquid spilled onto the porcelain. Blood, not enough to scream, too much to ignore. A colleague found her minutes later, pale and shaking, her reflection distorted by fluorescent lights. Someone called an ambulance. Someone asked questions she didn't answer. Brianna lay on the gurney, staring at the ceiling, counting the tiles so she wouldn't have to think. She already knew. The hospital confirmed it that night. Stage 3 gastric cancer. Aggressive, advanced, unforgiving. The doctor spoke gently, the way people do when they're trying not to scare you, which somehow made it worse. We should begin treatment as soon as possible. Brianna nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't ask how long she had. She asked only one thing. Can I finish my current case first? The doctor hesitated. She smiled faintly. I'll take that as a yes. She didn't tell her family. Not her father, not her mother, not her brother. They hadn't earned that truth. They had taken years from her life already. She wouldn't let them take the end of it too. Only Daniel knew. He found out because he noticed the pill bottles before she hid them. Because he noticed she stopped eating. Because he noticed the way she flinched when pain shot through her abdomen, even when she pretended it was nothing. You're sick, he said one night, not as a question. She didn't deny it. I don't want them to know, she said quietly. Daniel didn't argue. He never did. From that day on, he became careful in ways that broke her heart. He cooked food she could stomach. He kept count of her medications without making it obvious. He stayed awake when she couldn't sleep, sitting on the floor beside her bed, scrolling through his phone with the volume muted, pretending not to watch her breathe. He treated her like someone fragile without ever making her feel weak. That kindness hurt more than cruelty ever had. Her family found out anyway. They always did. Her brother showed up at her apartment one evening, unannounced, furious. "Why didn't you tell us?" he demanded. Brianna looked at him from the couch, exhaustion carved into her bones. "You didn't ask," she replied. Her father followed days later, anger replaced with concern that came too late. "We can afford the best doctors," he said. "You don't have to do this alone." She laughed. A short, bitter sound. "I've been alone my entire life," she said. "Why stop now?" Her mother cried, apologized, promised to be better. Brianna listened in silence. She had learned something important over the years. Apologies don't undo damage. Regret doesn't resurrect the dead. Love expressed too late is just another form of selfishness. They wanted redemption. She wanted peace. The trial ended in her favor. She won. The courtroom applauded quietly, respectfully. Her client cried. Her colleagues congratulated her. Brianna stood at the podium, victorious, and felt absolutely nothing. That night, she went to the cemetery alone. She brought a small cake, chocolate, the kind her brother used to buy when they were kids because it was cheap and sweet and made bad days bearable. She sat in front of the gravestone, the grass damp beneath her legs. "I won today," she said softly. The wind moved through the trees. "I wish you could have seen it." She smiled, tears blurring her vision. "I'm tired," she admitted. "I don't think I want to fight anymore." No one answered, but for the first time, she didn't feel angry about that. Her condition worsened faster than expected. Chemotherapy drained her. Painkillers blurred her days. Food became a chore. Sleep became a luxury. One night, during a storm, the pain became unbearable. Daniel rushed her to the hospital. She gripped his hand in the car, knuckles white. "If it gets bad," she whispered, "promise me something." "Anything," he said. "Don't let them make this about themselves." His jaw tightened. "I promise." She believed him. Brianna died 2 weeks later, quietly. Daniel was there. Her family arrived too late. They stood around the bed, grief-stricken, shattered, saying her name like it might pull her back. It didn't. On the bedside table was a sealed envelope. Daniel handed it to her brother. "It's for you." Inside was a single page, written in Brianna's precise handwriting. "I spent my life trying to be worthy of love you never intended to give. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I'm done carrying the weight. Please don't mourn the daughter you failed. Remember the woman who survived anyway." Daniel didn't stay for the funeral. He left flowers quietly at the grave weeks later, long after everyone else had stopped coming. Spring was beginning. The world moved on. Brianna did not, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't being left behind. I did not die the day they told me my body was failing. I died much earlier, in quieter ways. I died every time my family chose convenience over truth. I died when love was conditional, when silence was rewarded, when sacrifice was invisible unless it was theirs. The day I stopped fighting was not dramatic. I did not scream or curse or beg. I simply realized that living had become an obligation instead of a desire. I had spent my life being strong for people who never learned how to hold me when I was weak. In the hospital room, I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed effort would earn belonging, the one who believed endurance was the same thing as worth. She deserved better. She deserved rest. Daniel held my hand and did not ask me to stay. He understood that love is not possession. He told me it was okay to be tired. For the first time, someone gave me permission to let go without calling it failure. When my family arrived, they cried. They apologized. They promised change. I listened quietly and understood something that no longer hurt. Regret is loud, but it comes late. Love that arrives only when loss is inevitable is not rescue. It is guilt searching for relief. I forgave them, not because they earned it, but because I did not want to carry them with me anymore. As my breathing slowed, I thought of my brother, my sister, my mother. I hoped they would learn. I hoped they would choose differently next time. But hope was no longer my responsibility. I thought of Daniel. I hoped he would keep living. I hoped he would not measure love by how much pain he could survive. When the pain finally faded, it did not feel like falling. It felt like setting something heavy down after carrying it for too long. I do not want to be remembered as a tragedy or a warning. I was not weak for getting tired, and I was not cruel for wanting peace. I gave everything I had until there was nothing left to give, and that is not a moral failure. It is a limit. If someone hears my story and chooses kindness sooner, chooses honesty sooner, chooses listening instead of judgment, then something good remains. If someone learns to ask instead of assume, to stay instead of disappear, then my life was not small. It was simply quiet. And quiet things still matter. I hope it reaches someone who needs permission to rest, to speak, to leave, and to believe they are enough without apology or explanation ever. If there is anything left of me in this world, let it be this. Love should not require self-erasure. Family should not cost you your voice. Strength should not be demanded until it breaks you. I was Brianna. I lived quietly. I loved honestly. And in the end, I chose myself.